Victor Reed had been dead for weeks. His funeral was over. His house was empty. At least that is what everyone believed. Nobody in Black Hollow Village knew that the real nightmare was only beginning. Victor Reed was 35 years old. He was known throughout the village for his violent behavior and addiction to alcohol. People avoided him whenever possible because trouble followed him everywhere. Fights, arguments, damaged property, and endless chaos had become a normal part of his life. Even his own family had finally given up on him. After years of conflict, they separated him from the family and gave him a small house beside the main property. Victor lived there alone. Months passed and nothing changed. Then one morning the village woke up to shocking news. Victor Reed was dead. Some villagers believed he had taken his own life. Others whispered that someone had finally decided to get rid of him. Nobody knew the truth. What made everything stranger was how quickly the funeral happened. There was no investigation, no questions, no post-mortem. Within a few hours Victor was buried and the entire matter seemed forgotten. Among the villagers lived a farmer named Daniel Carter. His property shared a boundary with Victor's old house. Not long before Victor died, ownership of that property had legally passed into Daniel's hands. Some people believed Victor had signed the documents while drunk. Others believed the transfer was completely legal. Whatever the truth was, Victor had never accepted losing that land. After his death, Daniel started using the property to keep cattle and store equipment. For a short time, everything seemed normal. Then the dreams began. Every night Daniel saw Victor standing beside his bed. Sometimes Victor stared at him without speaking. Sometimes he demanded the land back. Sometimes he appeared holding a knife. Each night the dreams became darker. Each night Daniel woke up sweating and unable to sleep. The nightmares continued for days. Then suddenly they stopped. Daniel felt relieved. He believed the nightmare was finally over. He had no idea that something much worse was waiting for him. A few days later, Daniel was working late in the old courtyard. The cattle had been sick for several days and refused to eat properly. As the sun disappeared beyond the trees, he carried medicine and feed into the area that once belonged to Victor. The moment he stepped inside, something felt wrong. The air felt unusually heavy. A strange feeling settled in his chest. Even the animals seemed nervous. They kept staring toward one of the old rooms at the far end of the courtyard. Daniel tried to ignore it. He finished feeding the cattle and prepared to leave. Then he noticed movement. Someone was sitting inside the old room. At first he thought it was a villager, but when his eyes adjusted to the darkness, his blood turned cold. A man was sitting on a wooden chair, perfectly still, watching him. Daniel instantly recognized the face. It was Victor, the same Victor whose funeral had taken place weeks earlier. Daniel froze. The figure did not move. It simply stared at him. Its eyes never blinked. Its expression never changed. Daniel pretended he had seen nothing. Slowly he turned away and began walking toward his house. He could feel those eyes following him, step after step, closer and closer. The moment he reached his door, he slammed it shut and locked it. That night a high fever struck him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Victor sitting in that chair, watching, waiting, and smiling. For the next several days, nobody entered the old courtyard after sunset. But strange things continued to happen. Every morning the calves were found untied. The ropes remained on the ground, as if someone had carefully removed them during the night. Milk containers were overturned. Feed was scattered everywhere. And the cattle looked terrified. It was exactly the kind of trouble Victor used to cause when he was alive. Daniel knew something was very wrong, but he still had no idea how dangerous the situation was about to become. One morning Daniel woke up and reached for the metal container of water beside his bed. The moment he looked inside, his heart nearly stopped. The water was no longer clear. It had turned dark red, thick and heavy. It looked exactly like blood. Daniel dropped the container onto the floor and stumbled backward in shock. For the first time, he told someone everything. The nightmares, the figure in the chair, the untied animals, the strange events inside the courtyard. Terrified and desperate, he went to a local priest and explained what had been happening. The priest listened carefully and then told Daniel something that made him even more uncomfortable. According to the priest, restless spirits often remain attached to places they loved, hated, or considered their own. And Victor had died angry, very angry. A few days later, a spiritual cleansing ritual was arranged at the property. Prayers echoed through the courtyard from morning until sunset. The priest moved from room to room, blessing every corner of the house. When the ritual ended, he gave Daniel a warning. Victor may still appear. You may still see him. But if the ritual has worked, he will not be able to harm anyone. Daniel wanted to believe those words. And for a while things became quiet. The nightmares stopped. The animals returned to normal. Nothing unusual happened. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into a year. Eventually, everyone believed the nightmare was finally over. Then a family wedding brought dozens of relatives into the village. And one of those relatives was about to witness something far more terrifying than Daniel ever had. His name was Ryan, and he had absolutely no idea what waited for him on the other side of the old courtyard. The wedding celebrations lasted for 3 days. Relatives had arrived from different towns and the entire village was full of excitement. Music, laughter, and conversations continued late into the night. Among the guests was a young man named Ryan Brooks. Unlike the rest of the family, Ryan knew nothing about Victor. Nobody had told him about the strange events surrounding the old courtyard. Nobody had told him about the figure people claimed to see after dark. On the second night of the wedding, Ryan woke up around 2 in the morning. He needed to use the bathroom. Trying not to wake anyone, he quietly got out of bed and walked across the courtyard. When he reached the bathroom, he realized someone was already inside. Ryan waited for a few moments, but the person inside showed no sign of coming out. The pressure was becoming unbearable, so he decided to use an open area behind the property. Without thinking, he pushed open an old gate and stepped into the abandoned section of land. The same place nobody entered after sunset. The same place that once belonged to Victor. The night was completely silent. No wind, no insects, no sound at all. Ryan walked a little farther and stopped near a wall. As he looked up, his entire body froze. Something was hanging from the roof. At first it looked like a large animal, but then it moved. Slowly, its head twisted toward him. Ryan felt every drop of blood leave his face. A man was hanging upside down from the edge of the roof. His arms dangled toward the ground. His eyes were wide open, and they were staring directly at Ryan. The face looked pale and unnatural, like something that had been dead for a very long time. Ryan instantly ducked behind a small wall. His heart pounded so hard he thought it would give him away. He covered his mouth and stayed completely still. Minutes passed, then more minutes. The silence became unbearable. Finally, Ryan gathered enough courage to peek around the corner. The thing was gone. For a brief moment, relief washed over him. Then he heard something, a scratching sound, slow, deliberate, coming from directly above him. Ryan slowly lifted his eyes, and what he saw almost made him scream. The figure was no longer hanging from the roof. It was moving across the wall, walking sideways like gravity meant nothing. Its head remained twisted at an impossible angle. Its eyes never left Ryan, and with every step it came closer, closer, closer. Ryan realized something horrifying. The thing had seen him, and now it was coming for him. Ryan wanted to run, but fear had locked his body in place. The figure continued moving across the wall. Its movements were unnatural. Its arms and legs bent in ways no human body could. The scratching sound echoed through the darkness. Slow, steady, getting closer every second. Ryan finally forced himself to move. He turned and sprinted toward the gate. The moment he started running, he heard another sound behind him. Footsteps, fast footsteps. Something was chasing him. Ryan did not dare look back. He ran with everything he had. Just before reaching the gate, he risked a glance over his shoulder. What he saw haunted him for years. The figure was no longer on the wall. It was standing on the ground, only a few feet away. Its face was now completely visible. The skin looked gray and rotten. Its eyes were black, and a twisted smile stretched across its face. Ryan screamed. The sound woke several people inside the house. Lights turned on. Doors opened. Voices filled the courtyard. The moment people rushed outside, the figure disappeared, as if it had never been there. Ryan collapsed near the gate, shaking uncontrollably. At first, nobody believed him. They thought he had seen a nightmare. But then Daniel arrived. The moment he heard Ryan describe the face, his expression changed. Because Ryan had described Victor perfectly. Even though he had never seen a photograph of him. Even though nobody had told him what Victor looked like. The next morning, the entire family gathered together. Daniel finally revealed everything. The dreams, the figure in the chair, the red water, the strange events, and the ritual that had happened a year earlier. The family was horrified. But what happened later that evening terrified them even more. Because when they entered the abandoned courtyard, they found fresh footprints in the dirt. Only one set. They began near the old room and ended at a solid wall. There were no return footprints, nothing beyond the wall, as if something had simply walked into it and vanished. Nobody entered the abandoned courtyard that night. The gate remained locked. The old room stayed closed, and every member of the family avoided even looking in that direction. But fear had already entered the house. Nobody slept peacefully. Around 3 in the morning, Daniel suddenly woke up. A sound had pulled him from sleep. Knocking. 3 slow knocks, coming from somewhere outside. Daniel sat up and listened. A few seconds later, it came again. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was coming from the old room. The the same room where Victor had been seen sitting after his death. Daniel tried to ignore it. Then the knocking became louder and faster. It continued for nearly 10 minutes. Then it stopped. Complete silence returned. Daniel thought it was finally over. Then a scream shattered the night. It came from the room where Ryan was sleeping. Everyone rushed toward him. When they entered, they found Ryan sitting upright in bed. His face was completely pale. His entire body was shaking. He could barely speak. After several minutes, he finally told them what had happened. He said he woke up because somebody was standing beside his bed. At first, he thought it was a family member. Then the figure leaned closer, and he recognized the face. It was the same thing he had seen in the courtyard. The same black eyes, the same twisted smile. Ryan said the figure slowly raised one hand, pointed toward the window, and whispered something. Just 3 words, "I am still here." The room fell silent. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew what to do. The next morning, several family members packed their belongings and left immediately. They refused to spend another night there. But Daniel stayed, because deep inside he believed there had to be a reason. Victor wanted something, and until they discovered what it was, the nightmare would never end. That evening, Daniel made a decision. For the first time in over a year, he was going back into the old room alone. The place where everything had started. The place where Victor had first appeared. And hidden inside that room, he was about to discover a secret nobody expected. As the sun disappeared, Daniel picked up a lantern and walked toward the old room. Every step felt heavier than the last. The courtyard was silent. No wind, no sounds from the animals, nothing. It felt as if the entire property was holding its breath. Daniel reached the door. For a few moments he simply stared at it. Then he pushed it open. The room smelled old and damp. Dust covered everything. Broken furniture stood untouched in the corners. The chair where he had first seen Victor was still there, exactly where it had been a year ago. Daniel slowly searched the room. At first he found nothing unusual. Then his lantern light fell upon a loose section of the floor. Curious, he knelt down and pulled the wooden board aside. Underneath was a small metal box. Its surface was covered in dirt. Daniel carried it outside and opened it. Inside were several old papers, a photograph, and a folded letter. The photograph showed Victor standing beside his father many years earlier. But it was the letter that caught Daniel's attention. The handwriting belonged to Victor. Daniel unfolded it and began reading. With every line, his face became paler. According to the letter, Victor had never sold the property willingly. He believed someone had tricked him while he was heavily intoxicated. The letter was filled with anger, hatred, and promises of revenge. Near the bottom, one sentence stood out. "If they take my home from me, I will never leave this place." A cold chill ran through Daniel's body. Then something happened. The lantern suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the courtyard. Daniel froze. A second later, he heard breathing. Very close. Much closer than before. Slow, deep, and directly behind him. Daniel turned around. And there stood Victor, only a few feet away. His eyes were darker than night. His face looked twisted with rage. But this time he was not smiling. He looked furious. Victor slowly raised one arm, then pointed toward the house, toward Daniel, toward everyone living there. And for the first time, Daniel understood. Victor was not protecting the house. He was trapped inside it. And now he wanted someone else trapped there with him. Before Daniel could react, the figure stepped backward, straight into the wall, and vanished, leaving only silence behind. But the worst part was still waiting, because when Daniel looked down, the letter was gone, and in its place was a fresh handprint, made from something dark, something that looked disturbingly like blood. Daniel did not sleep that night. The bloody handprint stayed in his mind until sunrise. The next morning, he contacted an elderly spiritual practitioner who had helped several villages with unexplained events. After hearing the entire story, the old man agreed to visit immediately. When he arrived, he listened carefully. He examined the old room. He inspected the courtyard. Then he looked directly at Daniel and said something that made everyone uncomfortable. "Victor is not staying because of the house. He is staying because of hatred." The old man explained that some spirits become trapped when they die carrying extreme anger. The stronger the anger, the stronger the attachment. And Victor's anger had never faded. That evening, preparations began for a final cleansing ritual. Candles were placed around the courtyard. Prayers echoed through the property. Family members stood together while the old man worked. For almost an hour, nothing happened. Then suddenly, every candle went out. At the same time, a freezing wind exploded through the courtyard. The animals began screaming in panic. Windows slammed shut on their own. And from inside the old room came a loud crash. Everyone turned toward the sound. The door had opened by itself. Darkness filled the doorway. Then a shadow slowly appeared. A tall figure stepped out. "Victor?" This was different from every previous sighting. He looked more solid, more real. His black eyes moved across the crowd, stopping on each person one by one. The air felt impossible to breathe. Several people started crying. Others could not move. Victor slowly began walking forward. Each step seemed to make the temperature drop even lower. Then he stopped. His eyes locked onto Daniel. And for the first time since his death, Victor spoke clearly. "You stole everything." The voice sounded unnatural, like several voices speaking at once. Daniel tried to answer, but fear had stolen his words. Victor took another step, then another. The old man immediately continued the ritual. His voice became louder and louder. The wind grew violent. Dust swirled through the air. The shadow around Victor's body began twisting unnaturally. And then something terrifying happened. Victor smiled. A slow, horrifying smile. As if he knew something nobody else did. As if the nightmare was far from over. Then every light in the courtyard went dark, and the screaming began. The screams came from every direction. People covered their ears. Some fell to their knees. Others ran toward the house in pure panic. The old man continued the ritual without stopping. His voice echoed across the courtyard, louder and louder. Victor stood motionless in the center of the storm. That terrible smile still stretched across his face. Then Daniel noticed something strange. Victor was not looking at the people. He was looking at the old room, as if something inside was calling him. The old man suddenly shouted, "Bring the box." Daniel instantly understood. He rushed into the house and returned with the metal box and the old photograph. The moment the photograph was placed on the ground, the atmosphere changed. Victor's smile vanished. For the first time, his face showed emotion. Not anger, not hatred, pain. The old man picked up the photograph. Then he revealed something shocking. Hidden behind the picture was another folded paper nobody had noticed before. The paper contained Victor's final message, a message written shortly before his death. It revealed that Victor had spent his final days completely alone, abandoned by everyone, consumed by alcohol and regret. But the last line changed everything. "If anyone finds this, please forgive me." The entire courtyard fell silent. Even the wind stopped. The old man looked at Daniel. His anger kept him here, but his regret trapped him. Daniel slowly stepped forward. For years, guilt had lived inside him. Whether he had truly wronged Victor or not, he knew their conflict had never been resolved. Looking directly at the spirit, he spoke, "Whatever happened between us ends tonight. We forgive you." Several family members repeated the same words. One by one, the courtyard became completely silent. Victor stared at them. His dark eyes slowly changed. The hatred faded. The rage disappeared. Then something impossible happened. The shadow around his body began breaking apart, like smoke carried away by the wind. For a brief moment, Victor looked normal again. Not a monster, not a spirit, just a tired, broken man. He looked toward the old house one final time, then toward the sky, and slowly vanished. The freezing cold disappeared instantly. The animals calmed down. The wind stopped. Everything was over. Or so they thought. A week later, workers arrived to demolish the abandoned section of the property. While clearing debris, they found something buried beneath the old room. A small wooden chair. The exact chair where Daniel had first seen Victor sitting after his death. But what terrified everyone was carved into the wood. 3 words. Words nobody had ever seen before. "I never left." The chair was burned that same evening. The property was eventually rebuilt, and no further sightings were ever reported. But even today, the people of Black Hollow Village avoid speaking about Victor Reed after sunset, because some believe that although the house is gone, something else may still be watching from the darkness. If you enjoyed this nightmare, don't forget to leave a like. Subscribe for more real horror stories and terrifying encounters. And remember, some doors should never be opened after dark. See you in the next nightmare.